Hello, welcome to ISAP, the International Forum for Sustainable Asia and the Pacific 2022, organized by Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, IGS. We are pleased to start the session, Climate Change Action and Regional Sustainable Development Synergies. I'm Miho Kamei, a researcher, Integrated Sustainability Center, IGS. This session focuses on interaction between local climate action and sustainable development strategies. Specifically, we look at how policy and science can interact each other to support the smooth and effective implementation of strategies on the ground, and how multiple stakeholders can be involved to promote the action locally and scale up to the globe. And today, as you can see on the map, we have a great combination of speakers who could talk very unique local approaches, different regions from different characteristics and approaches in the global context, as well as the differences among the policy and science and implementers' viewpoint. This session has a session partner of Urban Climate Change Research Network, UCCRN, which is a big global research consortium focusing on cities and climate change based on the Earth Institute of Columbia University. So many of the speakers today are currently working together on the new assessment report of UCCRN. And finally, I need to apologize as we have a great number of speakers today. So we would like to extend 15 minutes for the final panel discussions. And also, we could not have the Q&A during the sessions. So I would like to start the session. So firstly, I would like to introduce Maria Dombrov from UCCRN. She will make a brief greeting and introduction of UCCRN. Maria, thank you so much for joining this session, as New York is quite late at night. The floor is yours now.
Well, thank you, Miho, and I'm happy to be here. So hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining the Climate Change Actions and Regional Sustainable Development Synergies session, whether you're online or in person. Yes, it is getting a little bit late in New York, but again, happy to be here. So my name is Maria Dombrov. I am the Global Coordinator for the Urban Climate Change Research Network. We call it UCCRN or UCERN for short, whichever your preference is. We're one of the partners for today's session, as Miho was saying, and UCERN is a network of over 1,200 scientists, scholars, and expert practitioners. In fact, you'll hear from a handful of our members and even some of our hub directors in this session today. So UCERN's mission, what do we do? Our mission is to provide the knowledge that enables cities and their metropolitan regions to lead on climate change mitigation and adaptation with a focus on action, equity, and sustainable development. So a lot of aligning goals in today's session and what we do at UCERN. UCERN has 15 research hubs around the world. Our newest hub is located in Tel Aviv, Israel, which was launched at the recent COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. Our hubs are our way of embedding climate research and at the regional level in cities, which then allows us to understand the different city typologies. You know, what are the challenges happening in each city? What are the successes as well, and how do we best assess, plan, and implement a city's climate and sustainable development needs? So that's really what the format of our research hubs is to do. Lastly, I'd just like to mention UCERN's main product on the horizon, which is the third assessment report on climate change in cities, set to be published by Cambridge University Press as a series of 12 special reports. You can find all of the topics on our website. I can drop it in the chat. And these special reports will be published between 2022 and 2024. So definitely, very close to publication. And these reports will be focusing on the most pressing climate change in cities topics. So for example, I have COVID-19, equity, finance, governance, infrastructure, and I think I've hit all of the CLAs on this call who will be speaking today. But just to say that we have a wide variety of topics that we will be covering in the third assessment report on climate change in cities. Thank you. Miho, back to you.
Thank you, Maria. Sorry, now we would like to start the sessions. So first, we would like to introduce first three speakers. First, Daniel Veda from Columbia University. He's talking about the New York, and this is actually video presentation, and his talk focusing on New York City climate change risks and new risks and how science can support the city's climate long-term policy and real implementation with stakeholder involvements. This is very much go into key concept of our sessions. Then we will invite the two speakers from Mexico City. First, Giancarlo Delgado from National Autonomous University of Mexico. He will briefly talk about the Mexico City's ambitious climate resilience agendas at the local level as a central part of new NDC. Then we will invite Ana Karen Mendevil Valencina from Ministry of Environment of Mexico City. She will follow the more detailed policy programs and actions being implemented by the government of Mexico City. Two speakers from Mexico City will also express a great combination of science and policy interactions. Please go to the video presentation of Daniel Veda first.
Hello, my name is Daniel Bader, and I'm a scientist at the Center for Climate Systems Research at Columbia University. I'm unable to join you in person or live today, given it would be late or early in the morning here in New York City, but I'd like to take a few moments to go through my presentation and talk a little bit about identifying and managing climate risks in the New York City metropolitan region. I've worked in this field for close to 15 years now, and the majority of my research is focused on the adaptation and resilience side of the response here in New York City. And many of you will know and recognize that New York is one of the global leaders when it comes to preparing for climate change, and in particular cities and climate change. And while my work is very much focused on the adaptation and resilience side of things, it's very, very important to also highlight the significant progress and work under the way in the city towards reaching and hitting emission reduction targets, because that plays very, very much a huge role in this picture of how do we respond to climate change. So to start off, I just want to give kind of a high-level overview of how the city is responding to climate change, and also the role that the New York City Panel on Climate Change, the NPCC, plays in helping to facilitate the city's response. It really starts at the top, at the highest level of government. And now since the Bloomberg administration, so starting around 2007, 2008, climate change or climate risk, sustainability, those topics, those themes were really integrated right from the start at the mayor's office and then passed to the individual city agencies. It was made a focal point of the work that they were doing. And at the same time, you had the creation of a mayor's office of, at that time it was long-term planning and sustainability. Right now it's the mayor's office of climate and environmental justice, but a citywide agency or office in the mayor's office looking at climate and sustainability related issues. And then what you had was the NPCC, this panel of experts in climate science, in social science areas, health, risk management, really formed together, first formed in 2008. That was the first NPCC. We're now at NPCC 4, the fourth iteration of the Panel on Climate Change, started in 2008. And the primary goal here of the NPCC is to provide regular climate risk information updates to the city. The panel is codified, so by law they are required to issue reports and update the climate science at a regular interval. And in the most recent report, which was released in March of 2019, the NPCC 2019 report provides climate change projections, updates, and future coastal flood risk maps for the city. And we'll get a little bit into this in a minute or two here, but you see the cover of the report there, advancing tools and methods for flexible adaptation pathways and science policy integration. The role of the NPCC is really to work hand in hand with New York City to provide them the climate science information that then underlies and really what their adaptation resiliency planning is grounded in. So through that process, you have significant co-generation of ideas, co-generation of resources, let's say, that really are a product of conversations between the scientists and the stakeholders. And that back and forth process of kind of scientists are us saying, oh, here's where we are scientifically, the stakeholders saying, here's what we need. We really work back and forth to deliver the information so that it's meaningful and can be used for adaptation planning. We really do provide the best available local scientific data that we believe as scientists is fundamentally the start of the adaptation resilience process. I'm just going to run through some quick highlights on how the science has advanced or evolved with time. And as I mentioned previously, the NPCC, one of the primary goals is for the provision of climate change projections. The NPCC provides the climate change projections of record for New York City. What you had in the 2019 update was the NPCC did not issue new climate projections. What they did was confirm that the projections from 2015 or the NPCC 2 projections were the best available projections of record for use in resiliency planning, not only for New York City, but given this breadth or the scope of New York City and the integrated nature of many of our urban systems like transportation and electricity, they can be used across the tri-state area, across the metropolitan area, because, the rail line does not end where the Bronx meets Westchester County north of New York City. That rail line continues running, and it makes sense, and it is very much important to have consistent climate projections provided for all the users in this area. In addition to working with New York City, we do quite a bit of work with New York State on their adaptation resilience planning as well. But the science, kind of the foundation here, is the main product of the NPCC, the underlying portion of their report, let's say, or the majority of the report. These are the projections of record that then get integrated into adaptation planning. One of the things to highlight that's kind of new in the NPCC 2019 report, and since that time has become an even hotter topic, is the incorporation of community-based adaptation and working with various social groups, different neighborhood organizations, really to analyze that or to recognize how the vulnerability to climate change varies tremendously across in this case, New York City, but across most urban areas as well. The impacts are felt differently in different locations. This map shows a social vulnerability for New York City, a social vulnerability index for New York City, identifying some of the most vulnerable neighborhoods in the city and also some of the community groups that we have partnered with in our work with the NPCC. This will ultimately facilitate a better response. We can get the resources to the communities that have need. You can think of it from the most basic example of in an apartment building or an apartment complex or on a block, you know your neighbors, you know where the vulnerable folks may be, you know where your elderly folks may be, so that in the case where there was a coastal storm, a tropical cyclone coming, those folks may have less of the capacity to evacuate. You can share that with decision makers, and they can target their resources to help those folks out. That is really at the heart of this partnership between the communities and the scientists and the decision makers now working to address the needs that climate risk is really presenting in our area. The New York City, this social vulnerability index and heat and has really been focused on heat and health risk. Some of the impacts we're seeing kind of on the annual basis at this point in terms of summer heat and health risk. Many neighbors lack neighborhoods lack air conditioning use, so we try and target research that is there accordingly. All those strategies are really grounded on the science, which shows how the city is going to change 50 to 100 years from now from a scientific climate projection standpoint. As a result of that co-generation process, what you have is science-informed policy. What does that mean? That the projections are incorporated into planning. The city does incorporate forward-looking climate data into many of the design of New York City capital projects, new infrastructure investment, new infrastructure development, and it provides consistency. It gives those who are using the information, such as engineers, architects, planners, it gives them consistent projections and also consistent methodology to design resilient facilities. You have a kind of portfolio or guide for the users of the science information on how to interpret the information and how to make better decisions going forward. So that really wraps up what I wanted to talk about in terms of what New York City, very quickly, obviously there's a lot more to this, is doing as far as climate risk. And this is again focused on resilience and adaptation side. We're doing a lot as far as mitigation and emissions reduction as well. Key summation points or key takeaways, key findings are that this co-generation process between the scientists, such as myself at Columbia, and the decision makers at New York City's Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice and other city organizations as well. It's a back and forth process to deliver the best local available climate science information that really is the foundation of planning. And it's being integrated across the city and all their strategies of how to protect the city from climate risk as we go forward into the future. You know, we do experience extreme events here in the city now that illustrate how vulnerable we are. Those events will continue and perhaps in some cases accelerate in the future. So this is an ongoing process, and it really starts with the high level vision of the city government, making sure that the city agencies recognize the importance of this, and then engaging the science to make sure that the best available data is there. So thanks again for having me. I apologize again, I can't be there or be live with you in person, but feel free, the organizers will have my email and contact information to send any questions you may have at another time. So thanks again, and enjoy the rest of the workshop.
Hi, thank you very much for the invitation. For me, it's an honor to be participating in this edition of the 2022 International Forum for Sustainable Asia and the Pacific. So I will start by highlighting what most of us already know, that it's that urban population and urban growth is taking place within a context in which consumption of land and natural resources is increasing. So the estimated tendential scenario for urban resource consumption is expected to reach 14 tons per capita by 2050 from 11 tons per capita in 2010. This dynamism of consumption, it's well beyond the sustainable consumption patterns that should be in the range between 6 to 8 tons per capita. So these consumption of natural resources and land, of course, relate to climate change, particularly because they imply a further emission of greenhouse gas emissions. So only the consumption of steel, concrete, and aluminum by cities might represent between a quarter to a third of the global carbon budget within a 1.5 target. So in the face of this business as usual scenario for cities, we need an individual, a social, and an institutional change in practices and behaviors. So in the Geo for City report published last year, we start thinking on how to envision such urban transformation pathways. And despite that those pathways are going to be diverse between different cities and in relation to their specificities, in general, cities will have to deal with three general interconnected dimensions that you can see in the slide, meaning net zero circular cities, which are related to altering energy and material flows to significantly reduce natural resource extraction and achieve near needs zero greenhouse gas emissions and other forms of pollution and waste. The second dimension that relates to changing urban form to protect vulnerable urban places and populations from environmental degradation, the impacts of climate change and extreme events, including associated disasters and everyday hazards. And lastly, the third dimension that involves inculcating individual, as I already say, collective and institutional behavior and governance frameworks that include all urban residents, urban nature, and biodiversity, while considering justice across generations. So these three dimensions certainly contribute to moving forward the SDGs goals. So in this context, Mexico City and its metropolitan area certainly have, in the last decades, have faced different challenges that are related to these three dimensions that I already described. So I just want to make a quick annotation of Mexico and its metropolitan area. So in general, when we talk about the 22 million inhabitants city, we are talking about Mexico City and the metropolitan area. So we are going to focus our conversation now between me and Karen Mendeville, mainly on Mexico City, without losing this metropolitan, even megalopolitan perspective of the challenges that we have been facing in the last decades. So I'm just gonna point out the main challenges. There are others, of course. One that it's very well known internationally is water scarcity. And this challenge is due to the overexploitation of the city aquifer and because of water leakages and other inefficiencies within a very high complex infrastructure system that interconnects 4 basins. And of course, water infiltration, it's being compromised as far as urban sprawling keeps accelerating, mainly in the metropolitan area. So a second main challenge is related to soil subsidence. As we can see in the map, most of the northeast area of the city is highly sensitive to soil subsidence, and it is an issue that aggravates as overexploitation of the city's aquifer does. So in addition, this same area that is sensitive to soil subsidence, it's susceptible to earthquakes risks. So it's an issue that relates to urban resilience. A third point, it's congestion and air pollution, mainly due to the use of motorized vehicles within a relative close atmospheric basin. So it's we are in a valley surrounded by mountains. So the high concentration of jobs, as we can see in the map, those blue dots that you see in the map, contribute in aggravating congestion and pollution in peak hours. So this is an issue that relates also to land uses and land planning. Another challenge that we are facing relates to waste generation and disposal, involves challenges due to the volume of waste, the typology of waste, and certainly not the best practices in managing waste. And this is due to the interaction of dynamics of formal and informal waste management within the city, but also at the metropolitan scale. And We also confront an issue of informal settlements in areas of environmental value and biodiversity loss. As we can see, the south of the city, it's the area that concentrates most of the land with environmental value. And then in the other map, we can see the dots in purple that are the informal settlements within that area of environmental value. So these, of course, have certain impacts in environmental services, biodiversity preservation, and other issues that relate to the persistence of social inequalities that experience that population that lives in informality. And lastly, the city is vulnerable to climate change due to different issues that we have been experiencing, such as...
Jian, could you sum up?
Yeah, I'm finishing. So all these are challenges that the city is confronting, and to face that, the city has developed a strategy of several actions that seeks to move to an alternative scenario of the business as usual tendency, as we can see in the figure. And those key actions relate to these 8 main topics that the government is currently developing, and all these actions relate to one of the 3 dimensions of urban transformation that I already described. So I'm just gonna conclude with 4 main concluding remarks, just to give the floor to Ana Karen Mendeville so she can give further details on such actions that are being currently developed by the government. So first of all, the decisions that we take today will define Mexico City capacity to move towards more sustainable and resilient scenarios. Second, promoting an efficient use of resources and urban circularity will require changes in consumption patterns. Land planning at the local, metropolitan, and megalopolitan scales will play a central role in transformational pathways, seeking to balance regional and national land uses within inclusivity and justice. And you can take a look at the map that shows the unbalanced use of land. And lastly, further enhancing local capacity building, financing, and coordination of transformational actions at the local and subnational levels will be needed in order to accelerate Mexico City transformation. Thank you very much.
Hi, well, on behalf of the government of Mexico City, I begin by thanking the IGEF for the invitation to participate in this year's ISAP. Following up on the context that Giancarlo told us doing in Mexico City to promote sustainable development through climate action. Mexico City has 20 years of history of having assumed its first climate commitments, and today we have published at least 3 programs and 3 climate strategies. The last ones published last year. As mentioned, it's made up. This program and this strategy is made up by 8 issues or topics, main topics. But I would also like to highlight that we additionally have 3 throughout our climate policy. One is gender equality, the other is inclusion and human rights, and the other one is just and green transition through green jobs. All of them in order to promote actions focused on people and their rights. These goals and targets of mitigation were already shown to you by Giancarlo. And as you can see, our goal is to be 0 emissions by 2050. These goals are based on the carbon budget for Mexico City. But at the same time, we have our goal to be a more resilient and inclusive and just city in terms not only for mitigation. On these slides that I show you, I give you several examples for each line of action. Specifically due to limit times, I cannot go into details at this time, but I will mention the most relevant ones. First, you will be able to see on the short-term goals for 2024, and next to it, you can see the progress by this year, by 2022. In terms of mobility, which is the sector responsible for the 74% kind of the emissions in the city, we are promoting sustainable mobility through the access to efficient public transport for all people, expanding the systems to areas that this transport did not exist. We also promote the technological renewal of the fleet, both private and public, and also cargo. We are also promoting active of the cycling infrastructure, which we do with also a gender perspective, recognizing that there is different patterns of mobility due to the sexual division of labor. In terms of energy, we are looking forward to become a solar city. We started a strategy for the massive introduction of solar technologies to homes, reaching more than 25,000 homes. But we also tend to achieve to micro, small, and medium-sized, as well as public buildings to lead by example, and installing largest urban solar and our biggest market. In terms of waste, we are promoting a complete circular economy strategy that begins by avoiding the generation of waste and the reincorporation of waste in value chains, such as the generation of compost, the reuse of construction waste, and the generation of energy in landfills, and generation of biofuels from used cooking oils. In terms of water, we promote its sustainable use. Our main program seeks to install 100,000 rain harvesting systems by 2024, with more than 40% progress to date. This program also stands out for its gender perspective because it seeks to break gender roles where women are most likely to be responsible for managing the system, looking to react hydrological basin approach through the rehabilitation of the city's rivers, as well as the creation and recovery of wetlands. We are looking to recover at least one wetland per year, and we have already exceeded that goal established by 2024. Our essential mitigation and adaptation strategy focuses also in nature-based solutions. We seek to achieve the revegetation, with more than 40 million trees by 2024. And on the other hand, we have already exceeded our goal covering public space by 150% through new urban parks and green areas. The last topic in terms of adaptation is based on a comprehensive disaster risk management. Last week, Mexico City received the representatives of the Resilient Cities Network, and we highlighted the creation of a council with the participation of people for urban resilience, and we have created protocols and community brigades to attend climate risks in irregular settlements. Lastly, we have identified a series of enabling conditions that can help us to achieve our mid-century goals. Require coordinated work with all levels of government, especially with municipalities, to carry out more efficient actions in the territory. We need for the makers and the mainstreaming of climate action in development strategies. We need the participation of all stakeholders of society. We need an enhanced climate transparency framework that guarantees access to information and monitoring of several measures and results of climate action. And we also, well, it's a priority for subnational governments and especially like highlighted in COP. We need, well, greater access to innovative climate finance. So this is my confirmation. In case you need you need further information or have questions for Mexico City, we're here to help. Thank you.
Thank you very much for very impressive presentation from Daniel, Jian, and Anna. So after very comprehensive approaches from New York and Mexico City, we would like to invite the unique and cute climate action plan from Kumamoto Prefecture, Japan now. So as many of Japanese audience may know, Kumamon, who is a very popular bear and director of Department of Happiness at Kumamoto Prefecture, has jointly developed Kumamoto Climate Action Handbook, and today's speaker, Tamon Hamura, Deputy Director General of Environmental Affairs Bureau, will present Kumamoto's climate actions. Then we will move to the video presentation of Joana Portugues Pereira from Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. She will talk about Brazil's key challenges at local level, specifically in coastal areas, and policy interaction between national and local strategies. Before Mr. Hamura's presentation, we will see a video which shows who is Kumamon and how he could be a great leader to motivate citizens. This is a very unique and successful approach of Kumamoto Prefecture. Please enjoy the video first.
それでは熊本県の羽村です。
Thank you so much. This is Hamura from Kumamoto Prefecture. As you saw in the video in Kumamoto Prefecture, we have this Kumamon, a character who is very popular, and also Gachapin, which is another Japanese character, and we use them to discuss the current state of global warming and how to deal with it. And this is really useful and effective when we communicate with children. So in Kumamoto Prefecture, towards the zero carbon emission by 2050, we declare that we will decrease the greenhouse gases by 50% by 2030. But many residents or the Kumamoto citizens have raised their voices saying, we don't know what to do, or we don't really know what we are aiming for. So with that situation, we have organized the necessary efforts towards zero carbon into these strategies to make sure that the people can actually see. And we have a simplified approach called hop, step, and jump that shows the CO2 reduction effects and also economic benefits of these efforts. And these are quite visible to the citizens. So again, a great mascot, Kumamon, introduces the initiatives and actions in a very easy to understand way. So let me briefly go into what we mean by that. So HOP is the collection of actions that we can take immediately. So as you can see, let's not just leave the shower water running, save water. And on the right-hand side, it shows you what the effect it has. For instance, if each person shortens the shower time by 1 minute, we can save equivalent of 12 liters of gasoline or the CO2 equivalent per year. And also, it's 2,300 yen savings. So the next one is the step, which is one step further than main hop. So one of the initiatives says, when replacing your heating equipment, choose one that does not use fossil fuels. Of course, this is based on the assumption that the kerosene stoves will be replaced with air conditioners or electric heaters or some others. So this Kumamoto Zero Carbon book is quite well received, saying people are saying this is user-friendly and it's very easy to understand. And the businesses and mostly schools use this handbook as part of their environmental-related education. In Kumamoto Prefecture, about 16,000 fifth graders participate in the learning class for Higo children from Minamata. And in this, they learn about the environment and human rights, and also global warming countermeasures. We want the children themselves to look forward to and work on. はい。入ってますよ。And lastly, for zero carbon by 2050,
みんなで取り組むことが必要です。熊本県においてもさまざまな関係機関と連携して取り組みを進めていきます。熊本県からは以上です。ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。Thank you very much, Mr. Hamura from Kumamoto Prefectures. So we are now moved to Joanna Brazil presentation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joanna. I am an assistant professor at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, and I'm very glad to be here with you remotely to discuss and present perspectives of climate change actions and synergies in Latin America region, and presenting a case study specifically about northeast of Brazil. So Brazil has already started its low carbon and resilient transition. Brazil has one of the highest share of renewables in its power energy metrics. Fuels, biofuels, mainly ethanol and biodiesel, contribute to a quarter, 25% of the global fuels used in our roads. And we have one of the highest growth of installed capacity for solar panels, accounting for more than 17 gigawatts of installed capacity of solar panel in 2021. The bioenergy sector contributes to nearly 900,000 jobs, being one of the highest contributors for economic development and rural growth. And recently, the government promised to invest more than $70 billion in renewables, bioenergy, and waste management. And overall, the country has more than twice the size of South Korea in sustainable integration of crop, livestock, and forest practice. Having said that, unfortunately, in recent years, Brazil has become a laggard in climate action. Brazil is currently the 7th largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions, and if we consider only emissions from agriculture, forestry, and other land uses, the country is the top 1 emitter of greenhouse gases. And yearly, due to bad management of forestry and deforestation, the country emits the equivalent of the entire fleet of aircraft in the world. Having said that, several local and government states decided to step up, and they are at a unique position to curb the current trend of the central government to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Brazil. And one of the case studies I'm here to present to you is about Pernambuco state. Me and my research group developed and support the state to develop the low carbon plan in the region to become nearly neutral by 2050. Pernambuco area is equivalent to 98,000 square kilometers, the equivalent population of nearly Portugal with 9 million, and overall emits 25 million tons of CO2 equivalent yearly. Pernambuco state is particularly vulnerable to climate change impacts. Recife, its city capital, is the 16th largest or most vulnerable city in the world regarding climate change impacts. And on the right-hand side, on the top, we can see the vulnerability index for drought, and at the bottom, the index vulnerability for increasing risks due to infectious disease such as dengue, malaria, among other tropical diseases. The region is one of the forecasted hotspots for global warming, and scenarios may assume an increasing temperature anomaly up to 3.6 degrees Celsius in 2050, which has significant implications in increasing cold degree days and the overall stability of energy security. So considering that, we applied our national level and we downscaled our integrated assessment model to consider the potential for cost-effective pathways to reach a low-carbon scenario in 2050 in the region. Overall, we consider and we evaluate the avoided emissions of 40 million tons of CO2 equivalent, where that must be supported by sectoral and short and mid-term targets overall. So the 5 pillars for Pernambuco decarbonization scenario include sustainable use of land and immediately control of illegal deforestation that could remove up to 48 million tons of CO2 equivalent by mid-century, increasing share of advanced fuels, and mainly consider Fischer-Tropsch green diesel and biokerosene from ethanol to jet routes, and expansion of renewable energies, mainly from solar and wind power, and simultaneously increasing share of electric vehicles in cities. And regarding waste management, we identified biogas and biomethane as one of the most competitive strategies to simultaneously reduce greenhouse gas emissions and deal with waste management. And we foresee a potential production of 500 million cubic meters yearly by 2050. And last but not least, we also consider strategies related to bioenergy and capture and storage, which could remove up to 21 million CO2 equivalent by 2050. And that's particularly relevant if we consider the current and future refineries from ethanol, where CO2 is released from fermenters and it's in a nearly full state, which significantly reduces the cost of capturing these systems. So we also evaluate and we qualified the potential co-benefits in terms of other sustainable development synergies, mainly regarding sustainable terrestrial ecosystem services such as ensure food security, water resources, biodiversity. And we also evaluate the potential increase and creation of green jobs due to increasing local industries and potential in the region. We also evaluate potential synergies and international collaboration and technology transfer if Pernambuco state becomes a green leader overall. And last but not least, most of the technologies we are considering, they actually reduce air pollutants and are beneficial for air quality in cities that have direct impacts in improvement in human health. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you have a fruitful discussion in the panel and see you next time. Thank you.
So now we invite 3 speakers from US, India, and Bhutan. First speaker is Chuck Katsura from University of Colorado Boulders. He will talk about innovative approaches of US zero carbon districts, and he highlights LA 100 project with impressive scenario analytical frameworks. Next, Minal Pasak from Ahmedabad University, India will highlight great insights of urban climate strategy from IPCC AR6 report. then focus on specific case studies in Mumbai and Ahmedabad, and key challenges and opportunities from the perspective of Global South. And the third speaker, Tashi Wangmo from Samdub Bhutan, will present the current challenges of Bhutan under the climate risks and how gross national happiness policy can be integrated into their climate and sustainable development strategies for the implementations. Please, floor is yours, Chuck.
All right, thanks, Miho. Can you hear me okay? I'm going to take that as a yes.
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, thanks for inviting me, and hello, everybody. I'm going to talk about zero energy or zero carbon districts, I prefer to call them. So I retired from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory a few years ago. I'm now a fellow at the University of Colorado Boulder. But NREL has spent a lot of time over the years working on net zero energy buildings. In fact, the main office building is the largest net zero energy office building in the United States. But we made a transition away from individual buildings to what I would call all electric zero carbon districts. And one of the things we did was develop a computer model tool that allows us to model these kinds of districts. So for example, when you lay out a new district, you can lay the buildings out in such a fashion that the roofs remain unshaded. And so they're very, very valuable for solar photovoltaic energy production. And the other thing you can do is when you can model looking at moving heat from buildings that need cooling to buildings that need heating. So I'm just going to give a few examples of some zero carbon districts. This is one that's being developed in Denver. It's the National Western Center. Every January, there is a cattle, a stock show for 2 weeks, and they've wanted to expand that area into a year-round facility. So it's going to be a net zero district. It employs a lot of energy efficiency. One of the key features of that facility is that the city of Denver has a large sewage pipe. There's actually two of them, 2-meter diameter sewage lines that run from downtown Denver north through this property to a sewage treatment plant on the Platte River north of Denver. And so this district will use that sewage water as both a source of heat for heat pumps for heating in the wintertime and as a sink to dump heat for cooling in the summertime. And as an example of that, if you look at the city of Vancouver, they've been using this technique for many years to heat all the buildings in downtown Vancouver. And so they have large heat pumps that pull heat out of the sewage in the sewage treatment plant, and they heat hot water with that, and that hot water goes to the downtown buildings to heat them. The other thing that we're starting to see is some people call this a fifth generation district heating system. This is also called an ambient loop. And what an ambient loop does, I'm going to try to see if I can, I better not do that. Anyway, I was going to try to get rid of some icons. Anyway, what an ambient loop does is you have water that's flowing underground that is close to the mean ambient temperature being deep enough in the ground. And that is used as both a heat source and a heat sink for many different devices. And that keeps the heat pumps operating at very high efficiency. They have a small delta T, whether they're in heating mode or cooling mode. Okay. So here's a community that uses this concept. It's the Whisper Valley community outside of Austin, Texas. And they have a ground loop or ambient loop running through the whole development. It's a multifaceted development. It's a walkable community with schools, recreation centers, homes, offices, that sort of thing. And then each individual building has some solar photovoltaics on the roof and also has a ground coupled heat pump at each home, but that hooks into this ambient loop that runs through the district. So if you're more interested in this kind of thing, obviously I can only cover it very briefly today, but I wrote an article about these concepts, and there's a web link down at the bottom talking about these different concepts in more detail. So you'll get copies of the slides, and you can check that out if you're interested in more details. I also want to mention that NREL has put together a very complete guide for designing these districts. It's called a Guide to Energy Master Planning of High Performance Districts and Communities. And again, this is available on the web. It's a PDF, it's free. And I would recommend, if you're interested in this subject, that you consider downloading that. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is the LA100 study. This is another study that the National Renewable Energy Laboratory did. It was aimed at getting the city of Los Angeles to 100% renewable energy. And this is a report. Again, I'm covering it briefly, but if you want more details, you can go to this website. You can get an executive summary of the whole report, and they have a nice website where you can look at the various scenarios that were considered. So here are 4 scenarios, and each of those scenarios looked at different levels of electrification. Moderate, high, and stress. Obviously, I can't cover all these, so I'm just going to focus on the early and no biofuels, because this was the most aggressive. This was aimed at getting the city to 100% renewable electricity by 2035. So that's this example scenario. So if you look, this study was done in 2020, and you can see that clean energy generation, electricity generation was about 45% there. And you can see the mix on the left, and you can look at the different colors in the bar chart on the right to see how this electricity is supplied. So we jump now to 2025, already up to 90% is the plan by 2025. And you can see there in the numbers, those plus signs, you see there's an additional 350 megawatts of rooftop solar, an additional 400 megawatts of storage coupled with utility scale solar, and solar and various other things down at the bottom there.
Jack, could you please sum up question?
Yes, I can. So I'll go through this and I'll just show you this one last graph. And you can, so this is for 4 example days. So you can look at the winter on the left and the high demand summer in the middle. And you can see on the left, there are times of curtailment. That's the gray area. And in the summer, when there's very high demand for this scenario of actually reaching 100% renewable energy, they're relying on hydrogen that was produced from electrolysis using wind and solar energy and geothermal, and using that in combustion turbines. So basically, these are ways to achieve 100% renewable energy in a major American city. Thanks very much.
Thank you, great presentation. We will move to Minel Pasak from India.
Hi, can you hear me, Miho?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Right. Thank you so much to the organizers, IJS, and especially to Miho-san for putting this event together. So as Miho mentioned, I'm going to go through the first 2 or 3 minutes speaking about the key messages from the IPCC Cities chapter, and then focus on 2 Indian cities case studies in this ambitious 6 minutes. So the IPCC report highlights this key message that unless we have immediate and deep reductions across all sectors, of course, in greenhouse gas emissions, so the 1.5 degrees target is beyond reach. In the cities chapter, we highlight 4 key strategies that can help reduce emissions. The first is spatial planning. The second one is electrification of systems that Shop talked about. Green cover, green spaces, blue spaces, urban forests, trees, etc. that store carbon, reduce heat, and reduce energy demand. And sustainable production and consumption, something that Gian touched upon in his presentation. So so in terms of land use planning, compact cities which are walkable and have reduced the distance between housing and jobs, reduce sprawl, improve land, save land resources is the key strategy. Mixed land use where people walk and take public transport can reduce emissions by about 1/4 compared to the business as usual scenario. Electric vehicles were found to be a key technology option, but of course, we need to decarbonize the grid. As in my region, of course, all the electricity comes from coal and gas. And buildings have the potential to go to net zero. Chuck also showed some examples, but we need to retrofit the existing buildings and really have ambitious policies for the new buildings that are under construction. For the first time, IPCC has a chapter on demand, and we show that demand measures can reduce emissions significantly. The key strategies, we studied 60 interventions, of which the top interventions included walking and cycling, electrified transport, reducing air travel, building level reforms, and most importantly, dietary changes towards plant-based diet. These need to be supported by policies and infrastructure. And of course, we know that some populations in some regions require additional energy and resources to improve human well-being because they are below the average in terms of consumption of energy and resources. So here's a mapping of the SDGs that we did for the urban strategies. So the 6 key strategies, you can see that many of them have SDGs with synergies with a large number of sustainable development goals, mainly with health because of improved air quality, with electric vehicles, with other energy interventions. And especially, I would like to highlight the urban green infrastructure, which you can see in the 4th row has a large number of synergies with the SDGs. But now coming back to the focus of the Global South, that yes, climate change mitigation is essential. It leads to sustainable development, but different countries have different challenges, especially in the Global South, where there are challenges of growth, development, and adapting to a changing climate. And I also noticed that Gian mentioned a lot of these challenges in his presentation. Many of these cities are at an early stage. They will need energy and resources to construct new buildings, a large number of housing for the growing urban population. For example, in India, the urban population is about 500 million, but it is increasing at a rapid rate. In Ahmedabad itself, the population increase was about 2%. And as you would have seen the latest UN report, India will be the largest populated country in the world next year. This expansion is going to lead to a large amount of steel and cement consumption. So our consumption of building energy materials is significant year on year. I'd like to highlight in the next 2 minutes the 2 Indian case studies very briefly. So the first one is Mumbai, is the largest city in India, 20 million. The figure on the right, the photo on the right shows all the slums in Mumbai, so the challenges of informality. On the left, it shows transport and traffic challenges and air quality challenges, but also a massive waste problem. And Mumbai also faces huge floods, especially in recent years, heat waves and drought. The per capita emissions in Mumbai are quite low. The official number is about 2 tons per capita, but it is increasing rapidly. So Mumbai has a very ambitious net zero plan, and it is among the only city in India with such a comprehensive plan. It was supported by the World Resources Institute, and the plan highlights 6 key priorities, including net zero energy, especially solar, retrofitting existing buildings for improved efficiency, but also renewables and smart technologies. There are strategies for transport. Population in Mumbai already relies a lot on walking and public transport. So the challenge is really to maintain that modal share amidst the growth in personal and private vehicles. The strategy talks about managing floods, enhancing green cover, which is declining rapidly, waste and air quality. And you can see the last 2 strategies are really urban environment and not so much climate, but that's really the focus because of the challenge that Mumbai faces. The plan also highlights how it will be implemented and who will be the actors implementing the plan. The second case study is Ahmedabad, where I live. We are the 7th largest city. You can see the land cover changes between 1976 and 2017. And you can see the increase in built up area and the loss in the surrounding agricultural land, surrounding forests and open spaces. So we are really getting more and more built up, leading to urban heat, extreme urban heat, summer temperatures go beyond 45 degrees. So while we are putting in more electric buses, new metro line, we have an ambitious heat action plan, but really to manage all these environment challenges alongside climate is looking very challenging in the near future. So this is my last slide, Miho-san, just in case you're getting anxious. So I would like to summarize to say that there are a lot of opportunities in the Global South for mitigation and adaptation actions that can have synergies with the SDGs, and cities are doing, they are adopting sectoral strategies and plans, but the implementation is fragmented. And if we actually better understood these synergies and implemented these not in a siloed approach, but in a more integrated manner, we could achieve more. So I will stop here and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mineru-san. It was very perfect time management and also very fruitful, impressive presentations. So we will move to Tashi from Bhutan. Tashi, could you please?
Hello, yes,
yours?
Yes, hello. Hello to everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me as one of the speakers here. And my presentation is generally on Bhutan. I'm not going to speak about the specific cities or towns. Next, please. Can I have the first slide? Just to give a brief background on Bhutan, because I think many of us may not know where Bhutan is. Bhutan is actually a small, very small country sandwiched between India and China. And we have a type of government we have is constitutional monarchy, which means like the head of the state is still the king. He's the fifth king right now. His name is Jigme Namge Wangchuk. And the head of the government is the prime minister. He is a doctor. His name is Lote Tsering. And the development philosophy we follow here in Bhutan, as I think everybody knows, is a gross national happiness. And it has 4 pillars actually. That is, one is good governance. And we also focus on sustainable socio-economic development. We focus on preservation and promotion of tradition and culture, as we are a small country and we need to keep our identity. And the fourth one is the environmental conservation. As we all know that Bhutan is a carbon neutral country, and we want to keep it as it is for many years to come. And also, as per the constitution, the constitution mandates us to keep 60% of our country under forest cover for all times to come. However, as of present, 71% of the country is under forest cover. Next, please. This is just to highlight some of the highlight what I have said through pictures actually. So here, if you can look at it, how we are still preserving our environment. Next, please. And the recent trend is, I think, it's happening everywhere in the world. We are also facing with lots of urbanizations, with rural urban migration, especially in Thimphu, the capital city of Bhutan. And the projection also shows that the maximum urban population will be in Thimphu by 2047, and the poorest right now the poorer population lives in the rural areas. Next, please. This picture again shows how urbanization is happening in Bhutan. Just to highlight, if you look at the first picture, that is in 2006, and the picture below shows in 2016, and that is the same area. You can, without me having to explain, you can see how urbanization is happening in Bhutan. And with urbanization, as we all know, we are losing biodiversity, and because of the development of infrastructure such as roads, like transmission lines and all those things, because of which, again, forest degradation is on the rise, and waste is also, because of urbanization, waste is also on the rise, and which is again resulting in air pollution and all those things. So this is also becoming a problem in Bhutan, as is, I think, the same with in the world. And the other thing is also in Bhutan, although we are a carbon neutral country, but the impact of climate change is also seen in Bhutan. So on the right side of the pictures, if you see, these are some of the pictures of disasters we have in the recent years. So the first one is the Gulf disaster. The second and third is the landslide and the flash flood. Second one is flash flood, and the third picture shows the landslide because of the climate change. Next, please. And to add up to all these things now, because of the COVID-19 COVID pandemic, we have also realized that the access to basic needs is become very, very important. Next, please. And this is what's happening in Bhutan, the urbanization, the pictures, like, however, we are trying our best to preserve our tradition and culture in the buildings as well. Next, please. And if you look at the energy front, actually, Bhutan, as I don't know whether here whether you all know or not, but we are still using the renewable energy. We have hydropower electricity. We get power from hydropower, and however, many prefectures in Bhutan still uses the conventional type of appliances for heating and cooking. So if you can look at the pictures, so these are some of the appliances we still use in the rural areas. So which is also a challenge for Bhutan. Next, please. Next, please. And as I mentioned, some of the way forward, what we are doing right now is, especially in the planning, urban planning and spatial planning front, Bhutan, actually, we have already come up with a comprehensive national development plan for Bhutan 2030. And with the help of JICA, of course, with this now, we also started new method of planning. Previously, what we do is we prepare plan only for the urban areas, but now we have started preparing plan for the valley. So we call it valley development plans. And that actually includes not only the urban area where the development is rampant, but also the area surrounding the urban areas, because in order to curb the sprawl. And in this planning, what we do is actually prior to planning, we also do the geotechnical studies and hazard mapping, so that some of the areas which are vulnerable to flooding and landslides, where the areas are environmentally very sensitive. So those are some of the areas which we actually reflect in the plan for no development, so that the risk of disaster is reduced drastically. Next, please. And on the energy front,
sum up soon.
Okay, on the energy front, as we all know, Bhutan uses renewable energy, but we also are looking for alternative renewable energy for diversification, mitigation, maintain carbon neutrality, as I mentioned, the enhanced mitigation target. Next, please. And the targets and the actions we have taken. Next, please. Actions we have taken, as I mentioned, we are changing the appliances used by people in the rural areas, and we are also into solar paneling, and we have prepared a number of guidelines for renewable energies. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. I think the slide is not moving, but anyways, my last slide is on, these are some of the actions, way forwards we have already undertaken. But I'm also working with Miho-san. I'm doing a small, these are some of the, again, like capacity, actions we have taken for landslide along the roads by engineering. And then, as I mentioned, we are also doing meteorological observation and forecasting for flood warning. So all these things, we are actually into all these things. In addition, as I mentioned, I'm also working with Miho-san on climate scenario and regional sustainable development strategies for local areas in Bhutan. So we are looking at some scenarios, different kind of scenarios with focus on energy, food, water, and health. Thank you.
Thank you.
So sorry. I took a little bit more time. So sorry. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for very many of beautiful pictures of Bhutan. So now we would like to move to the next two presentations comes from European context. These two presentations are the video presentation due to Europe. It's in the quite early morning now. So first, Pamela Fennell, University College London, will talk about the key challenges in specifically building sector in UK. And also she will show a very impressive building stock model scenario approaches, which can be already adapted in the context of UK. And final presenter, Silvia Assarini from Convent of Mayors Europe office. She will talk about basic framework of EU Green Deal and how these high-level policies can be translated into the local strategies and show some case studies of unique local implementation plans in Europe.
Hello, I'm Pamela Fennell. I'm a lecturer in urban building energy modelling in the Building Stock Lab, which is part of University College London's Energy Institute. And I'm going to talk about UK decarbonisation trajectories and the role that real-world urban building energy modelling can have in helping to achieve those. Recent decades have seen a reduction in the UK's carbon emissions, largely driven by a shift from coal to gas as the primary heating fuel, and more recently as a result of increases in energy efficiency. The challenges that lie ahead are significant though, and much deeper change is needed to achieve future decarbonisation targets. A group of colleagues in the Energy Institutes have recently published some groundbreaking work in Nature Energy, looking at a model across a wide range of different sectors and a variety of different scenarios to model possible pathways for the UK energy system through to 2050. The sectors they looked at were agriculture, industry, non-domestic buildings, residential buildings and transport. And they looked at 4 scenarios altogether. The first scenario does show some energy consumption reductions in most sectors, although notably not in the non-domestic building sector over time. And that's because it continues with existing policy instruments which are already in place, but nothing new is introduced. The second scenario, called STEER, introduces a wider range of energy efficiency options and shows a much deeper shift in decarbonisation by 2050. To go further than that, it's necessary to focus on energy demand strategies and an ambitious programme of interventions across the whole economy. And the final scenario, Transform, requires transformative change in technologies, social practices, infrastructure and institutions in order to achieve a 52% reduction in total final energy consumption by 2050. The reduction in the building sector is roughly 52%, in the residential building sector and 48% in the non-domestic building sector. Across both non-domestic and domestic sectors, buildings accounted for 23% of UK emissions in 2019. They're responsible for about 59% of UK electricity consumption. Most of that electricity use, which counts as indirect emissions, stems from appliances and lightings in homes and cooling and catering and ICT equipment in non-residential buildings. Interestingly, over recent years, the view of the best pathways for achieving decarbonisation in UK buildings have changed significantly. From a focus on fabric first, so reducing overall energy demand, followed by implementation of decarbonised heat sources, to an increasing focus on decarbonising heat. This is largely driven by the rapid decarbonisation of the electricity supply, which you can see in the bottom right, meaning that heat pumps really are the key decarbonising technology for UK buildings. It's important to note that UK homes, though, are very leaky compared with similarly aged buildings and equivalent building stocks, particularly in Europe, and that this can have significant health impacts for people. A large number of homes in the UK are too cold for the health, particularly of vulnerable people. And energy efficiency can result in considerable health benefits if it allows temperatures in the home to be increased. The key focus for the UK building sector currently is on data, its analysis and visualisation, both from monitored buildings during construction and in operation, but also large-scale data sets that cover all buildings in order to get a better picture of the whole building stock. And energy performance certificates that are mandatory are one of the key tools that we have for understanding buildings across the UK in more detail. However, these currently lack data about actual energy use in buildings and could be significantly enhanced in terms of their predictive value if that were to be included. Urban scale building energy models are vital tools for understanding and implementing changes to achieve decarbonisation across large building stocks. They allow us to identify poorly performing buildings and assess the potential for retrofit or for renewable technology installations. They can be coupled with other spatial data sets, for example, socioeconomic data, which allows us to assess fuel poverty and understand who's worst affected. They allow us to explore scenarios for retrofit, the potential for renewables, and issues in demand-side management, both at the individual level and across stocks of properties, while taking account of the three-dimensional character of the urban fabric. But beyond these energy-related issues, we can use the same tools to explore indoor and outdoor air pollution, to track material flows and begin to look at embodied carbon as well as operational carbon, and to integrate with digital twins of infrastructure systems and networks to create true digital twins. Using these models brings a number of challenges, and of course there are opportunities too. In particular, the representing millions of units requires significant processing power, and the detailed geometry demands terabytes of storage. A key issue that needs to be addressed is that much of the data that can be extremely valuable in these models is often confidential and requires a secure operating environment. And if the public are to have access to these tools, continual maintenance is required, which is a significant burden in a research environment. There are some real challenges as well at taking models that have been developed within the UK and applying them outside the UK, although we've made considerable progress with this within the lab in recent years. And of course, cutting-edge computing requires very highly skilled staff who are in demand elsewhere. We see some real opportunities though going forwards, in particular integrating other high-resolution demand data sets for transport planning and for power networks. We can improve the granularity of the models further with image extraction, particularly looking at glazing ratios, roof shapes, and other characteristics of the built environment. And there's a real opportunity to widen access to these types of models and to develop tools which can be used in data-poor environments as well as data-rich ones like the UK, including tools which can be integrated with other geospatial planning tools. And so that's just a flavour of the type of work that we're focusing on in the Building Stock Lab. And if you'd like to know more about any of that, please do get in touch. My details are here.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Cynthia Ascalini, and I'm part of the Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy in the European Office. My apologies for not being able to participate live. I hope this presentation will still give some inspiration to our audience. I take also the opportunity to thank the organizer of this year's edition of the International Forum for Sustainable Asia and Pacific for inviting us to present some of the actions that our signatories are putting in place and how we as Covenant of Mayor Europe Office support them in responding to climate change. The effect of climate change has been particularly evident this summer in Europe. Well, in many other places in the world, it has been recorded the highest temperature ever, and particular low level of rains, and on the other hand side, extremely intense rainfalls cause drought and flood with considerable damage to infrastructure, crops, and human life. The European Union stepped up its effort to respond to climate change. The European Commission, guided by President Ursula von der Leyen, put this as one of the key priorities for its mandate, which translated in 2019 in the announcement of the European Green Deal, which is a roadmap that outlines steps toward an economic growth that consider and must include also climate, biodiversity, pollution, and social justice. Another key stepstone in Europe was then the transition of the Green Deal into the climate law, which was approved in July 2021. The climate law made binding the target of becoming climate neutral by 2050 and to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of at least 55% by 2030. To get toward those targets, all the member states are required to draft a plan, that's called NECP, and National Energy and Climate Plans, which have to be periodically revised and reported again. But before plunging into what the Covenant of Mayor Europe does in concrete terms, I just want to mention that the European Commission kicked off many initiatives that are intended to support European cities in throughout all the steps of their climate journey. Here on the screen you can see some example. I know you cannot read it, but just to mention that, for example, we have the European Climate Pact that focuses a little bit more on the community engagement. Then we have the Covenant of Companies and the Smart City Marketplace that looks into including in this process all the businesses. Then the Net Zero Cities mission that together with the mission of adaptation is providing targeted support to the front-running cities in Europe. In this complex panorama, the Covenant of Mayor Europe is a European initiative that was funded in 2018 and by now gather over 10,000 local governments and voluntarily commit to achieve and exceed the EU climate and energy targets. Over time, this initiative has been evolving quite a lot, starting from mitigation. It has been first including adaptation and since then advocating and supporting cities for taking a more integrated and holistic approach to climate action. And then a third pillar was added on climate and energy poverty, but very in terms of time is the new commitment that was issued following the changes at the European level in terms of climate objectives. This new commitment comes on 4 different principles: commit, engage, act, and network. And by looking a little bit closer to this, you see that beside, of course, the inclusion of the climate neutral objective by 2050, a strong great recognition is the engagement and importance of engagement of all sectors of society in this transformation, in this effort, and this to allow an action that is at pace needed to respond to the emergency that we are all facing. And this engagement element is also the key and the central point of the very first example that I want to share with you today to make a little bit more concrete this wide framework that I just introduced to you. From multi-level governance, I will start to make this great framework a little bit more concrete with an example from Belgium. The northern region of Flanders approved in 2021 its climate plan, identifying 4 main areas of work: nature-based solutions, mitigation, mobility, and water management. Regional government endorsed the government and mayor principle, and together with the municipality could develop and shape what has been called the Local Energy and Climate Pact, which operationalized the climate plan in 18 actions, securing a high level of ownership and commitment from the actors on the ground. The next step from the regional government is to set up a desk to collect feedbacks from municipalities and work together in finding solutions wherever needed. And moreover, the regional governments would also revise every 2 years the climate plan, and citizens would be also engaged in this revision process. From north to the western part of Europe, in Portugal, with an example coming from the coastal Cascais, is divided by the famous river that in the 80s had the most damaging floods ever recorded in the city. Since then, the municipality started to implement some risk reduction measure, deploying mainly free infrastructure. But from 2017, a bit of a mindset change happened when the council engaged in drafting the first action plan for adaptation. On that occasion, they decided to have sit around the table not just the usual suspect and the usual expert, but to broaden to a wider set of different actors, including environmental organizations and civil protection. The result was an integrated approach that, leveraging on the combination of blue and green infrastructure, managed to recuperate the river valley, and not only to tackle successfully the flood risk, but also to favor biodiversity, to reduce the risk of fire, to lower the temperature of almost 2 degrees Celsius, and to give commuters an alternative car to go around the city. So that was overall an increasing level of life quality for all citizens. Citizen-centered action is also the red thread of the example that I'm bringing to you from the city of Zagreb in Croatia. They decided to combat the problem of energy poverty. And to do that, they teamed up with civil society organization as well as the local university to train students and researchers to carry out simple energy audit and intervene within the identified energy poor households with low cost improvements. Beside those visits, the students and researchers were also carrying out qualitative data collection, and the results of this data collection was used by municipality to shape better support to energy poor households. In a great example of how the city can, based on its strategy, harvest the potential of local stakeholders, in this case, the university and the NGO. Another great example of local governments and local stakeholders cooperation, but in this case with enterprises and companies, is coming from the city of Östersunds in Sweden, which since 2017 is issuing green bonds to implement action in line with city climate strategy. Östersunds set the ambitious target to become carbon neutral by 2030, and to support the effort and endeavor toward this objective, companies are invited to submit proposals for green projects that are then analyzed and selected by the city's climate and environment unit in consensus with the finance unit and the council of companies to assess whether those projects are really aligned with the city's priorities. Since then, a great number and variety of projects have been funded, resulting in almost 700,000 megawatt hour of renewable energy produced and over 250,000 CO2 emissions saved. But in this project, also the social component was considered. And for example, a contractor had as mandatory the engagement of youth professionals in their work. These were some of the many actions that our cities are taking, and we as Government of Europe Office are doing our best to support them in many different ways. As a recent example, the Energy Saving Sprint campaign was launched in spring 2022 to help signatories facing the consequences of the energy crisis. As part of this campaign, we started to collect and organize best practices of energy saving measures that can be easily implemented and have an immediate impact on the energy bills of cities. More information about the energy saving sprint compliance, but also the example that I've talked about from different cities and even more, can be found in the Government of Europe Office website, which I invite all the audience to check out for more information. Thank you so much.
Thank you for all the great presentations. So now we complete all the presentation, but we were initially planning to move to the panel discussions, but as for the time constraint, I apologize, we don't have enough time to have the panel discussion. So I would like to ask all panelists for make short remarks for each. Is it okay? So I would like to ask Jian first for related to these titles.
Yeah, just I would like to highlight the relevance for Mexico City and perhaps for the Global South to build capacities at the local level. So Mexico City is composed by 16 local municipalities plus more than almost 60 local municipalities that conform the metropolitan area. So that's a big challenge, and I think that's something that is being shared by megalopolitan cities or big cities in the world. So yeah, that's my message.
Thank you, Jian. And may I ask Anna for final remarks?
Yeah, thank you. I will only say one thing. One of the most valuable lessons learned by Mexico City here and in all kinds of exchanges with another cities and other is that all cities and all parts all something to share, and also all cities have also always something to learn. So these kind of exchanges like today help us to walk this path together and to improve towards shared goals. So it was our pleasure, and we hope to continue to do so in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And your combination, Jian and Anna, policy and science was very fit to this session title and very impressive for us. Thank you so much from Mexico. And may I ask Mr. Hamura from Kumamoto Prefecture. Hamura-sama、どうかよろしくお願いいたします。
日本ではですね、先月末に
In Japan, at the end of last month, the new global warming prevention in Japan, I start again. At the end of last month, the new global warming national movement has started, initiative has started to encourage each one of us to take action. Our day-to-day action will contribute to the zero carbon situation. If we have such awareness, the products and services provided by the businesses would also transform, as well as the society. Kumamoto is blessed with the abundant nature. To protect that nature, to protect the future of our children, we would like to continue to pursue our activities. Thank you very much today.
Very unique approach involving students was very learning a lot from our perspectives. So it was quite new types of approach for us. Thank you so much. for your great presentation. And we would like to ask Chuck next for your final remark.
Yes. So I guess I'd like to say that, you know, we've been fighting this climate change crisis for over 3 decades. And the good news is there has been a dramatic improvement in our options in the last decade. Wind electricity has dropped in price by over 70%. Solar photovoltaics has dropped by over 90%. And so we now have the solutions we need. We need to convert the electric grids to solar and wind electricity. And then we need to electrify everything that we can. And even there, we have great opportunities. Now, battery electric vehicles are much more efficient than gasoline cars. And we're even now seeing battery electric trucks. And then in terms of buildings, just in the last decade have emerged very, very high efficiency cold climate heat pumps. And so the whole idea basically is convert the grid to clean energy and basically convert the transportation and the building sectors to all electric. Now that's easier in new buildings than in old buildings. There are challenges, but still the good news is we really have solutions now.
Thank you, Chuck. Great transformation now happening in US is very impressive for us. Specifically, the transformation and Green New Deal policy in LA is very progressive, I think. And yeah, we look forward to what's happening next in US. Thank you so much. And could we move to the Minao?
Thank you so much, Miho. I really like your optimism, Chuck. I just like to summarize in 3 points. The first one is that, yes, we have the solutions, but we need speed and scale. So we really need to deploy these in a very ambitious way. And taking from Jian's point as well, in the Global South, we just need to find ways to make these happen, whether it's through policy, finance, and technology transfer. The second point I want to make is that technology alone is not going to solve the problem, and we have to do something about demand and consumption and find ways in which people can make sustainable choices. And I look at Hamura-san as well. And my final point is that the synergies and trade-offs is sometimes applied very loosely. And we need to study these co-benefits, trade-offs, and all these interactions a little more closely and find solutions that can sort of address multiple objectives. This will just make implementation easier. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your great summary. Yeah, we learned from your presentation that key challenges is very different in different regions. So we would like to, continue discussion, looking forward to having such a discussion with you in the future. Thank you. So Taji-san, could we move to your Bhutan strategy? Final remark?
Okay, thank you so much, Miho-san. I totally agree with Chuck and Mina. Now, as I think from all the presentations we made today, we can see that there are solutions in place, unlike in the past. So now I think it is time for all of us to come together and have, I think, more of such platform to discuss the issues and the challenges we have and the solutions. Of course, the solutions are, it's not that, one solution fit all. So that is why it has to be contextualized. So in order to do that, I think we need to all come together and discuss. So as Hamura-san, Taman-san has mentioned, the idea of hop, step, jump is very, very interesting, which especially when he mentioned that replace your heating appliances. So which is also, I think it is a small solution, but I think it is going to make a big difference. So which is also what Bhutan is actually trying to do, as I mentioned in my presentation, that we are trying to replace the appliances, the conventional type of appliances we are using right now. So with more energy efficient appliances. So these are some of the things I think which we need to keep in mind. And also on the planning perspective, we need to come up with a climate resilient planning system in which is, I think, very, very important, because for any developmental activities, the initial phase is the planning. So that is why, again, I would like to reiterate that we need to come together in this kind of a forum and discuss climate issues every now and then in order to keep all of us informed and take necessary action. Thank you.
thank you, Tasan. I think many of people are first time to see the very specific strategy of Bhutan's. So it was very, thank you for your great presentation, Tasan, with very beautiful picture today. And now I would like to conclude this session as we had very fruitful and rich local unique approaches to tackle regional environmental key challenges in different regions. So finally, this is quite not easy to summarize in 1 or 2 sentences. So, but we recognize these opportunities are quite important for sharing experiences and new knowledge, and as well as exchange ideas. So I'd like to thank all of you for joining the sessions today, and I hope the discussion was very fruitful and insightful. In this ISAP 2022 is still ongoing through the 5th of December. So I hope to see you in other session at ISAP 2000, ISAP or next ISAP as well. So we also appreciate finally if you could take a moment to fill the survey after the session. So finally, we would like to say goodbye to audience all together. Are you ready to say goodbye? So thank you so much for audience and all of people for joining this session. So we are now finish this session. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Miho.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. See you again.
Yeah, thank you for all panelists as well.